Hello, everybody, and welcome to our annual D6 budget briefing. Unfortunately, this year we have to do things a bit different because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we still wanted to inform you about the proposed City of San Diego budget for this upcoming year. This budget year will no doubt be one of the most, if not the most, challenging budgets the city has faced. As of today, we have nearly 30% of San Diegans out of work. We've lost hundreds of millions of dollars in sales tax and tourist tax revenue, and we don't know when things will begin to recover. So it's much more important we get this information out to all of you and how you will be affected by the city's budget. Like in years past, we have with us our independent budget analyst, Andrea Tevlin, to provide an overview of this year's budget. And then I'll go into some of the details about how this budget will impact our District 6 residents. Now, I'd like to introduce our independent budget analyst, Andrea Tevlin. And Andrea, we have your presentation ready to go.
Okay, good morning, Council Member Kate. And listeners, I'm glad you're here. This is a really important topic, particularly this year. So just if you're not aware of the Office of the Independent Budget Analyst, we are the group that advises the City Council on their issues. We do research and analysis for them and help them to make informed decisions. And we review the entire budget each year and show them where we think things could be changed or should be modified. But our role basically is to provide clear and objective and unbiased analysis to both the City Council and to the public as well. So the budget is much more than a bunch of numbers, as you know, but the numbers reflect important city policies and community priorities, all of which affect our residents. And here are named just a few of the programs and services that are most impacting on our communities. Why is the city's budget important? I know that's a very obvious question, but this chart shows that it is really important where our funds go. You can see that the first two bars are made up of fire and police, and it's over $800 million of our $1.59 billion budget. So we're putting our money where it should be with public safety, and it's hard when we have a large deficit to address. It's hard to make changes in those categories, and they take up half of the budget. And so, unfortunately, some reductions typically have to fall to Parks and Recreation, library, stormwater, and some of those operations. So just a real general fund overview, high level. This is the pie chart of $1.59 billion, again, showing the same result, of course. I just shows it to you in a little bit different way. So I'd like to briefly talk about the different roles of the council and the mayor. Some people have, confusion, which is understandable. It's a very large city. We have a mayor, and we have a city council. We have elected city attorney. So they're all important roles, and they're all part of the strong mayor form of government. So in this form of government, the mayor is the CEO, and he's responsible for proposing a balanced budget to council by April 15th. And he also has an opportunity in May to make any known changes to the budget, which will definitely be the case this year because our revenues continue to drop as a result of COVID-19. The council is responsible for reviewing and approving the proposed budget before June 15th. So once the mayor hands over the budget to the council, it is within their authority, and it is within their authority to change budgeted line items or services and programs or revenue sources proposed in the mayor's budget, as long as the budget remains balanced, which is critical. Our office during this process, as I mentioned, we review and analyze the mayor's proposed budget for the council and the public, and we provide support to the city council and its committees throughout the entire process. And we develop final budget recommendations for city council consideration in their final budget approval. The mayor can veto council changes to the proposed budget. However, the council can override, though, a mayoral veto with 6 votes. And after the budget's adopted, it's all of our roles to monitor expenditures, revenues, and significant city programs and services throughout the year. The next chart is a busy chart. It shows our annual budget development process. It is lengthy, and it is can be confusing. Who is doing what and when and where, and who do you talk to? But in November, the mayor starts with a 5-year outlook, which he is required to do per our charter, which lays out the next 5 years and also gives us a good picture of what next year's budget will be and what he's thinking of. December and January, the mayor's departments, the administrative side of the organization, develop and submit budget proposals to the Department of Finance. In January and February is when the council makes its first contribution to the budget process. The council develops a priorities resolution, budget priorities resolution that they vote on, and they provide that to the mayor. That comes about by the mayor, each council member submitting single memos to our office, and we combine those and we develop, the results of what are the major ideas that the council and ideas and other programs that the council would like to see for 2021. So in February and March, the mayor starts developing his budget, and in April, he has to release a budget. In early May, the council does all the hearings. The mayor does not do the hearings as he develops the budget. The council holds many hearings, public hearings, as they review his budget and decide their decisions. And they want to hear from the public all through this process. And that started on April 11th, I believe, and then April 29th, I'm sorry. And then last week, the council did 5 solid days, whole days of hearings with every single city department. Had to come forward and discuss their budgets and respond to questions that the council had. And then tonight there is the final public, just a general hearing. And if you're interested in that, I encourage you to call into it. We have a process now where the public can call in rather than having to just write your information that you want the council members to read. So I encourage you to do that tonight if you're interested. So I just wanted to, I told you the budget starts with the November 2019 5-year outlook, but there have been dramatic changes since then. Back in November, we were projecting an $84 million deficit, which wasn't bad out of a $1.6 billion budget. It was doable, and a lot of that was due to some proposals that the mayor was making for new programs. So we were pretty set for being able to fund our existing budget as it currently stands today without new things. So in February, the council develops the priorities resolution to guide the mayor. And at that point, there was no knowledge at all of the extent of which COVID-19 would be impacting our revenues or how long it would be. So both the outlook and these priorities, as I mentioned, were both before COVID. So these would be very different documents today. And so the budget is a very different document than these two right here. But at the time, the council told the mayor that they were including priorities of city facility improvements for fire, library, parks and recreation, homelessness, public safety, street and sidewalk improvements, arts and culture, support for libraries, and the climate action plan. So the mayor starts developing his budget, and in early March is when revenues begin to decline due to COVID-19. Stay-at-home orders, businesses closing, hotels closing, conferences being canceled, almost no air travel. So our revenues began to plummet more than what we could have ever expected, and it was literally overnight. So overnight, in projecting what was happening and what could happen over the next several months, we project a $258 million deficit for fiscal years 20 and 21. And that's made up of TOT and sales tax primarily. Those are the largest tax groups that have been hit by the COVID-19 disease. So city revenue projections during March were revised over a dozen times, just to try and get a handle on it, and they continue to slide. So the mayor develops his budget, and in that he has to address the general fund expenditure reductions that will help address the deficit, and he focuses on a significant amount of budget expenditures and other mitigations. So for 2021, he was focused on, or had to focus on, the libraries. He's proposing hours be reduced on Sunday and Monday closures, and then hours reduced on the other days. Park and recreation, he's proposing recreation center hours are reduced from 60 to 45. In his other expenditure reductions and mitigations, he is recommending decreases to arts and culture, to street and sidewalk improvements, cuts in tree maintenance, reductions in tree trimming and landscaping, reductions in our stormwater contracts, climate action plan funds, funding for weed and graffiti abatement, programs that planning is currently underway with. Police civilian positions will be cut, as will the Star and Pal unit. He's proposing no contributions to the infrastructure fund and no contributions to the general fund or our pension reserves. In addition, to address the funding that is reduced just for the current year, he's recommending a hiring freeze. He's recommending using some general fund capital projects that will have to be filled with other sources of funding. He's also recommending utilization of our projected assets equity, which is basically our fund balance. And he is using 54 million of our emergency reserves. Additional mitigations for next year, I already mentioned the library and parks and recreation and the police and the stormwater. He's give you some of the dollar amounts he's looking at and position cuts that will be made if the mayor's budget is approved. His budget also relies on sale proceeds from the stadium, and it relies on the fund balance in another fund, which is called the Fleet Replacement Fund. And he's looking also at as I mentioned, the delay in the general fund reserves. So following the mayor's budget coming out, additional tourism cancellations begin, and they continue. And the mayor announced after his budget was released that another $50 million was projected to be lost as a result of COVID-19, making the shortfall 300 million rather than 258. During that month, cancellation of Comic-Con and other July conventions pulled out, and proposed budget, of course, was released without knowing that this was going to happen. So the mayor has issued a second call for additional departmental reductions. He is working on that now. He is working on updated projections and proposed mitigations, additional ones to be released with the mayor's May revise. And it is potentially could be a vastly different budget in March. Now, the good news is that a couple of weeks ago, we learned that the city was receiving $248 million from the federal government for the CARES Act funding. And city management is determining right now the eligibility requirements. The requirements are that anything that we want to fund or need to fund was not in the budget this year. So it can't be something that was already budgeted. It is obviously very COVID-19 directed 100%. You know, the operations that we've had to pay for, the police, the fire, cleaning, services in the community, etc. All of those items that we have spent over and above our budget, we can ask for that money to be used for. We can also look at different programs that help businesses and other groups in order to spend that money. The money has to be spent by December of 2020, so it's a very short timetable, and it has to meet the eligibility requirements. And at this point, the mayor and the council have begun to identifying the potential uses, and our goal is to maximize use of all of that 248 million, which will help, but it does not erase our deficit. So we have a number of key financial challenges ahead, just big picture. Obviously, the ongoing uncertainty of COVID-19 and our people's behavior. When will people start traveling again? When will the conventions come back? All of those uncertainties that have come along with this COVID-19. There could also be an impact on our pension payment with the investments probably could be going down. We are also in ongoing labor negotiations, and we're trying to wrap that up so we know where we stand with labor negotiations. We have to use some one-time revenues, which we don't like to do. We generally say no one-time revenues for ongoing expenditures. That's best practice. We may have to do some of that this year and make up for it in the future. We also have a building that you may have heard about, 101 Ash Street, that had significant asbestos problems, and the employees have been relocated to their prior homes. And we have a consultant on board who is getting a handle on the depth of the asbestos problem and what we might need to do to make that building livable again. So that's an issue that is on our plate as well. And you know, we have quite a significant amount of capital infrastructure needs, and that is a big issue. In the future, we're going to need to find a new funding support, probably for capital infrastructure. And we've also had, this is the final challenge here on this page, we have a lot of vacancies, which has been hard on our employees. So for the future, we are focusing on these key goals and objectives: restoring the city's general fund revenues, developing a long-term plan to better maintain and address our growing backlog of infrastructure needs, providing ongoing shelter and services for our homeless citizens, making significant and measurable progress on climate action plan, developing a long-term plan to better address the city's human capital needs. And this last chart shows you the schedule that we are under right now. And the mayor will issue his May revise on May 19th. The Budget Review Committee, which is made up of the whole council, will hear the May revision. Council members will then issue final budget modification memorandums to our office. In June 3rd, our office will issue the final report on recommended revisions. And on June 8th, the council will make final budget decisions. And on June 29th, the city council will introduce and adopt the appropriation ordinance. And that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrea, so much for all of your efforts, especially during this time and what you're having to deal with, and providing us with all the information. It's really definitely appreciated as we get through what is a very challenging budget year.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic started affecting our local economy, this budget was facing cuts due to a forecasted recession on the horizon. And since the stay-at-home order was put into place, we've seen a drastic decline in sales tax and tourist tax revenue, as Andrea mentioned. For example, tourist tax revenue, our third largest source of revenue, is dependent upon things like conventions and travel. But we don't know when we will once again be hosting conventions. Cancellations of major conventions like Comic-Con have a huge economic impact to our city that is difficult to go on without. So now we're going to get into the details about the proposed budget's impact on District 6, and we'll go over a few things that Andrea mentioned in her presentation. As she mentioned, our entire budget for the entire city is about $3.9 billion, which is a 9.8% decrease over the previous or the current fiscal year, with our general fund at about $1.5 billion. One of the biggest things that we tried to do once the pandemic started was allocate funding to our small businesses. And we implemented a small business relief fund where we allocated about $6 million to that program. Since that time, over 10,000 businesses applied to receive part of the $6 million that was allocated, and 23 businesses within District 6 were awarded grants and loans. That accounted for 15% of all the businesses that were awarded funds. In this upcoming year's budget, the mayor is requesting $2 million to be allocated towards this fund to assist our small businesses throughout the entire city. One of the biggest things is infrastructure, and Andrew mentioned the amount of need that we have for our infrastructure. The proposed budget does continue some investments in important capital improvement projects, especially within District 6. One of the biggest things that we advocated for this upcoming year's budget is the reconstruction of Gold Coast Drive and Parkdale in Mira Mesa. This project has received partial funding to allow for the project to move forward with design, and our office has been advocating for the full funding so that we can begin the reconstruction of those two streets. $1.7 million was allocated to cover the first phase, and now we're hoping that in the upcoming fiscal year, as part of a debt issuance to pay for some capital projects, we'll receive again a significant amount of funding to begin the construction phase for this project. This is something to look forward to in the upcoming fiscal year as the city goes on to hopefully issue debt to pay for important capital projects throughout the entire city, and we hope that a portion of that will go to the reconstruction of Gold Coast and Parkdale. In FY19, we did see, again, continued improvement in our streets. We had over 32 miles of streets that were repaired, over 7,800 potholes were filled, and over 18,000 square feet of sidewalk was replaced. And we're also moving forward with a number of park improvements throughout our district. At Canyon Side, construction has begun, and the project is expected to be completed in the upcoming fiscal year. That project consists of upgrades to the children's play area, drainage repair on the western parking lot, and the creation of a parking area in the northwest corner. At Olive Grove, that design began in fiscal year 2018 and is hopefully going to be completed in FY21, this upcoming fiscal year, with construction. That project makes various ADA improvements at the community park in Claremont, and our office has been advocating for improvements to this playground for a number of years. In Kearney Mesa at Heckman Field, we were able to receive funding this current year for phase 1 of the project, and bids are currently being accepted. Once bids are accepted, staff will have to reassess the funding needs related to the project and figure out how we can move forward with phase 1 construction of that project. At Mira Mesa, we're anticipating that design will be completed in the upcoming year for phase 2, with construction to begin in the following fiscal year in fiscal year 22, to be completed in fiscal year 2023. At Wagenheim in Mira Mesa, construction is anticipated to begin in this current fiscal year and be completed in fiscal year 2021, as well as at Sauk Joint Use Park. We're expecting that construction going to be completed in fiscal year 22. And then again in Kearney Mesa at Centrum Neighborhood Park, We're expecting that project to be completed at the end of next year. Moving on to another important aspect of the budget, which is public safety. The proposed budget does minimize cuts to public safety and includes funding for more firefighters and allowing for the department to hire more police officers as well too. We're trying to keep residents safe with increased oversight of massage parlors as well too, as we have worked to try to combat human trafficking. And also we implemented our marijuana billboard advertising regulations as well too. When it comes to staffing, what we have seen over the last year is an increase of about 66 officers since this time last year. Right now, we have about 1,900 sworn police officers, and we're hoping that with the 4 academies that we have within our department, we're able to continue to hire more officers throughout the city of San Diego. In terms of wait times for our 911 dispatch, we've seen that 95% of our calls are in 10 seconds or less, with an average of 3 seconds for our 911 calls. In our non-emergency calls, which we've been working on over the last 2 years, we see that 70% of our non-emergency calls are answered in 40 seconds or less, with the average being about 59 seconds. And then homelessness, which has been a big issue as well too. We've been working to reduce the amount of homelessness within the city of San Diego, and we are allocating about $13 million in homelessness services through the city of San Diego. This does not include a number of funding projects from our Housing Commission, which is looking to invest over $100 million to address the homelessness problem throughout the city of San Diego. Now, neighborhood services is something that we are seeing a drastic cut on for the upcoming proposed budgets. We've seen proposals to reduce our library hours, also reductions in our parks and our recreation centers. And one thing that we're looking at doing is trying to restore those in the upcoming fiscal year. Looking at our recreation center hours, we have over 5,000 users at our District 6 Park and Recreation Center programs in 2019. Right now, they're budgeted to be open 45 hours a week. And as you can see from the slide, that's a reduction in years past, where we worked diligently to try to increase the number of hours at our parks and our recreation centers. For our libraries in 2019, libraries in District 6 hosted over 681,000 patrons and facilitated over 380,000 circulations of books. What we're looking at now is a reduction in our library hours from 53 hours a week to 40 hours a week. We're also seeing budget decreases for litter and graffiti abatements. When you look at weed abatements, we're seeing a 84% decrease in the upcoming fiscal year compared to this year. For graffiti abatement, we're reducing all the funding, which would be a 100% decrease in funding over the current fiscal year. And in tree trimming, an 81% decrease in funding for tree trimming in the upcoming fiscal year. As well, too, there are a number of different programs that we're looking to continue on. One is the Claremont Mesa Community Plan Updates. We're hopeful that the plan update will be completed in the upcoming calendar year or going into 2021. As well, too, the Kearney Mesa Community Plan Update is targeted to go to full city council no later than November of this year. And on Mira Mesa, we're hopeful that the update is fully funded through grants, and that should be completed in calendar year 2022. Additionally, my office has been actively advocating for childcare credits and reforms to the childcare system to address the shortage and expand access. This past week, I was proud to stand with Mayor Faulkner to announce the matching of the county's $5 million in funding for childcare for essential workers during the current pandemic. Now moving on, as Andrew mentioned, it's time for the council to weigh in on this budget. And what we have been trying to focus on is how do we restore neighborhood services? As I mentioned, the proposed cuts to some of the impacts that we are seeing will have a grave impact on residents throughout the city of San Diego and District 6. What we want to do is restore those services. So what we're thinking about doing is to reduce the items that you see on your screen here to get the funding that we need to restore some of those services. One of the programs that's been expanded in the past couple of years is the Mayor's Clean SD program, which goes to various trash services, cleanups throughout the entire city. What we want to do is reduce the increase in funding back to where it was a couple of years ago, which will save about $7 million. As well, too, we're proposing to eliminate the increase in our smart streetlights program by over $1 million. Remove all the funding for our arts and culture grants that are available, which totals about $6 million. As well, to utilize more of our vacancies, those positions that aren't being filled, and use those fundings to go back into our core neighborhood services. And as well, too, as a $2 million CARES Act funding to go to our small business relief fund that I mentioned earlier, what we're proposing to use part of the $248 million in the full CARES Act funding to offset that $2 million and free up that $2 million to go back into our city services. Based on these proposed cuts, that gets us about $29 million. Now, where we want the money to go toward are the restorations of the following: restoring our recreation center hours to 60 hours a week, restoring the Sunday and Monday library hours, restoring pool hours and operations, the funding that goes into weed abatement. Also, the mayor proposed to eliminate one crew to fill potholes throughout the city. We want to restore that 2-person crew, restore the funding for our graffiti abatement and our brush management, as well as restore the funding for tree trimming. That gets us about $13 million. What we do know, based on what Andrea mentioned previously, is that we don't know what the May revise will say. We do expect it to be in worse position than we were given when the mayor proposed his budget a few weeks back. But again, we need to make sure that we are doing what we can to restore city services. And despite what will come out in the mayor revise, we're going to do what we can to restore those core city services. So that does it with our presentation. We did ask folks to email some questions in when we did this virtual town hall, and we did receive some questions. So I'm going to briefly go over those questions and some of the answers. The first question is, how can you protect the Parks Rangers budget? Hiking in our canyons is a highlight of living in Claremont. Please protect their funding. They make good use of volunteers already. They take great care of our canyons. Theirs is a valuable service. So our priority is to keep the personnel funded. That's a great question. And one of the things that we have been advocating for, as I mentioned, is the restoration of all city recreation centers, pools, and parks, all those services that we provide to residents that I believe are core neighborhood services. So we're hopeful that we can restore the funding for those within the upcoming process. The second question says, my budget and other citizens' budgets are tighter, and we need the library services to help us get through our weeks. Can you open the library soon so that we can have access again? So one of the things that we are seeing throughout all this is that libraries are going to be a core community service once we get through the pandemic. When we talk about nearly 25% of San Diegans out of work, one of the things they'll be using and doing is going to libraries to look for jobs, to update their resumes. So we think it's imperative that we restore all of the hours at our libraries so that residents can utilize the full breadth of what our libraries offer each and every day. The next question says about our roads and overhead lines. Claremont seems to be the last part of San Diego to still have power lines overhead. What can you do to get our lines buried and roads resurfaced? Can you promise to get our roads done ahead of other communities who have had their overhead lines buried for several years already? Well, the city does have a utilities undergrounding master plan with the project schedules of streets that will be undergrounded, and those are updated frequently. What we can do, though, for this individual is have our staff contact them to get information about what street they lived on and see where we can advocate to get their streets put on the list. And we encourage all of our residents to reach out to my staff with their specific questions about certain streets and certain areas where they are looking to have their power lines undergrounded. That way we can begin become advocates for them and get those streets done. The fourth question says, the streets surrounding Mount Acre Way in Claremont have not been paved for approximately 30 years and are in horrible shape. Can you please help us get this repaved? Each year, we produce our budget priority memo as Andrea listed. And one thing that we try to do is get every street that our constituents send us, put on that list and ask the mayor to include funding for the repair of those streets. One of the things that we are going to be seeing, though, is with the economy where it's at, we're going to see a loss of gas tax revenue, and that could potentially impact the amount of streets that we're going to be repaving in the upcoming year. But again, we're happy to advocate for the amount of streets that do get repaved and make sure that the streets that we are asking for come directly from our District 6 residents. And then our last question is, I understand as a very concerned fisherman, outdoorsman, and taxpayer that some, if not all, of the city lakes are subject to closure. I'm sure that I'm not the only one concerned about this issue. Can you please help? We've heard a lot of folks from a lot of folks about this, and it does seem like a pretty small amount of money to provide a valuable service to San Diegans. We're hopeful that when the mayor releases his May revise, he restores this funding, and if not, we can seek additional cuts or funding to try to keep the cost of keep our lakes and our recreation facilities open. Again, I think it's a small amount of cost that we can do to provide this very valuable service. So that is it. That concludes our District 6 budget briefing. Again, we thank you for all watching. We are asking all of you to remain committed and involved and engaged in this process. And we hope that you will reach out to us if you have any additional questions and how we can be an advocate for you moving forward in what will be a very critical budget year. Thank you again for watching.